This is going to be a Flashback Hares Ear. Very effective hare's ear pattern. You can see I've got a gold bead on a size 16 kind of scud hook here. Most often I tie a hare's ear on just a regular nymph hook, but with this particular pattern I'm going to be using this curved hook. And I'm just using a 18-aught nano silk. It's a lighter color, just something I had in hand. And the thread color is not going to be overly important here because it's all going to be covered up by the materials that we're going to be using. So we're going to start out by tying in a tail. And for tail, we're going to give this a shot. And it looks a little bit ratty, but it's hen pheasant tail. You can use obviously lots of different materials for the tails on this particular pattern. Tail fibers are a little bit lighter in color, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. It's a tail that's, a little bit lighter in color. So we're going to go ahead and get that tied in, and then I'm just going to go ahead and tie this up to the front, and then we'll clip off the excess. And we're going to just come down around the bend of the hook here a little ways with the tail. And come back up, and we'll start tying in some of the materials that we're going to use on this fly. Because it's a flashback, we're going to use some, what I'm using is just some pearl, small size pearl, that's going to go over the back of the pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that tied in, and I'm going to want this on the top of the shank of the hook, because when I do pull it back over the top, I do want it to go right over the center of the top of the hook, and then I just draw the material back. I'll just take a few thread wraps to get that kind of secured into place down here to, where I want the abdomen on the fly to begin. And I'll just come right back up. I have a tendency to like to use more of a silver tinsel on these patterns, and it's an oval. So we're going to go ahead and tie that in next. I can draw this material back as well, but it does have a tendency to kind of slide off of the case material, so I'm not going to leave as much material to draw back. So I've got that material in place. That's going to be on our far side of our hook here, which would be closest to the lens for those of you who might be watching. We've got, okay, so there we go. We've got a couple of our materials in place. From here, we're going to go ahead and just turn to some dubbing. So I've grabbed myself a little bit of hare's ear. I've tried to pull out a few of the guard hairs. I don't necessarily need the back end of this fly to be as buggy as we'll end up making the front end. So sometimes I'll pick a few of the guard hairs out. I'm not picking them all out. That just allows me to dub this a little bit tighter. We'll turn our hook a little bit sideways here and travel our way back down to where that tail is and make sure we get a good first wrap there. And then we're going to tighten this dubbing as we move up the shaft of the hook. And we do have and want to have some taper in here, and we've got it. So with that part of the dubbing finished, I'm going to take this strand of small pearl tinsel. I'm going to just let that lie right over the top of the shank of the hook here. And it's not going to stand out as much as you might think. but that's kind of what I want. And then what I'm going to do is grab my oval tinsel here, and we're going to wrap that over the top of that mylar or pearl to create part of the flashback here. Again, I do like using this oval, French oval kind of tinsel. It's just a little bit wider, gives it a little bit of a more pronounced rib. So once I've got those two materials tied in, I can actually come in now with my scissors and clip them both off, and I have plenty of length now to tie another fly with both of these. The tinsel I'm going to cut towards the back end of deep in my scissors, because it is metallic, and I don't want to just, you know, ruin a good set of scissors. Next, we're going to tie in another piece of mylar pearl. This time we're going to use a much wider, and it's going to be our wing case on this pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this in. Again, because it's going to be a wing case, I do want to make sure I'm careful enough to keep that centered. I'll draw that material back so I don't have to cut it off. And we're just going to try to get that as close as we possibly can to the very center of the top of the hook here, so that when we fold it over as the wing case, it's properly located. And I'll let my thread just kind of dangle, because what I'm looking for here is to probably start the thorax right about where the point of the hook is. So I'll just take a couple of wraps forward, and I'm going to go back to my dubbing box, and this time I'm going to grab a darker hare's ear. So now I've got the darker hare's ear. This time I'm leaving those. I'm not even trying to pick any of those guard hairs out, because I do want this to be a little bit thick and buggy looking. So we're going to go ahead and tie this on, making sure that we've got a thorax that is more pronounced than what we've got for the abdomen. I'm going to grab a dubbing brush here as well, because I do want to brush a few of those fibers out. Not a lot, but a few. So if you just run your dubbing brush along the side, just on that thorax area here, you'll begin to see that it, you know, will create that kind of buggier look. I say that a lot, but I think when you see it, you understand what I mean. Now, when I'm tying this pattern, I tend to like to put legs on it. You can tie it with or without the legs. If you're tying it without the legs, we just take the swing case over the top now and finish the fly off. And macro doesn't do justice. It's hard to show a full skin on a partridge, but that's I've said it time and time again, invest in a partridge skin. But the feathers for the legs that I'm taking are going to be some of these that are up here closer to what would be the neck. And I'll prepare a feather that I've selected by pulling the fuzzy pieces out off of the bottom, so I have bare stem, kind of like this. And then I'm going to come in with my scissors, and I'm going to just cut a notch out of the center of that. So after I've cut that notch out, my feather is now prepared. You can see that nice V in there. I'm just going to take these legs, I'm going to kind of put them right behind the bead and work on just lightly pinching them in place right there. And I'm going to take a loose thread wrap to kind of get that in place. Then I'll take a look at it. Those are longer than what I want, so that's why I've left this back end on it, or I sometimes refer to it as a handle, because now I can just pull on this here and shorten those legs up. So right about there. Now I just have a hint of legs. I can go ahead and throw a few more thread wraps in here to just make sure I keep that secure and in place. And I can come in and we'll just snip off that back end with our scissors. And finally, we'll take our last step, which is we're going to take this pearl flashy material, I suppose. It's not flash, but it's pearl. But that's why they call it a flashback. And we'll just pull that somewhat tight over the top here, just like that. So we have a nice shiny wing case. I'll go ahead and take a few thread wraps to hold that into place. Then I'll pull it backwards and take a few more thread wraps to hold it in place. And at this point, I'm able to sneak in and we'll go ahead and cut off the excess. And it's okay if there's a little bit of a balance. It just will blend in with everything else that you've got there. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and grab my whip finisher. One of these days I'm going to take the time to learn how to do the complete whip finish with my fingers, but I'm kind of lazy. So there we go. Got the whip finish in place. I've got that so you can see it now, but I'm also turning it so I can cut my thread off. Just like so. And there you have it. Great fly. It's your hare's ear variation on that hare's ear using flash, so it's called Flashback Hares Ear. We've got the flash coming over the back end, over the abdomen, secured down with our wire, our tinsel. And then we've got the larger piece up here. We've got the classic kind of two-color tone of a dark thorax and a lighter abdomen on this. And the thorax we've kind of brushed out a little bit to make it a little bit more bushy and a little bit more buggy.